All right, we will go ahead and get started. We will be doing the rest of legislation today and everything kind of around legislation with the exception of two, and that is Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act, which we will pick up with those two next week because we go a little bit deeper into those for some other information that is listed in the manual. So if I had to pull two out, it was going to be those two, and we're going to talk about a couple of different sections that kind of overlap with those two laws. So I didn't want to just throw them in as legislation. So with that, we'll officially get started. Welcome to the On Scene First NENA ENP study group. It looks like my internet is being sketchy. Let me know if there's a problem in the chat. It was just lagging, but that's me too. I'm lagging after a busy week, but so this is week 9 legislation part 2. For those of you that are finding the YouTube page and you are not actually in the live study group, just for some clarification, this is a live study group that will continue on until September 30th. Where you will be able to request access to the actual live presentations until September 30th. That's a few weeks away. But if you're finding the YouTube channel but want access to all of the documents and the PDFs and all of that, please register at the link you see there, onscenefirst.com/training/study ENP. And then if you are finding this after September 30th, you will not get access to the live presentations, obviously, but you can get access to all of the recordings in order, all of the PDFs, any other documents and resources I provide by emailing me at teldridge@onscenefirst.com. And if you are looking to take the winter, I guess it's winter, but early 2023 ENP exam. So that would be the February timeframe. We will be, if you're going to take it in February, you would need to ask for materials for this study group right here. But if you're looking to take it in the spring of 2023, then just go ahead and go to the website onscenefirst.com and ask to be subscribed to be notified of any announcements, and you'll get the information on registering for the spring of 2023 study group. So that's the best way to keep up on all of my shenanigans. I want to say thank you to my premier study group sponsor, Rapid SOS. Thanks to their generosity, it allows me to continue to do what I'm doing here. It helps with the platform, the time, the resources, things that I need to make this happen. And if you're not sure what Rapid SOS is doing, I highly recommend you check out rapidsos.com. And if you don't know what they're doing, chances are you've been living under a rock. I'd also like to say thank you to NGA, Next Generation Advance. They are my premier sponsor for my podcast, as well as media presentations and things that I do. So any of the webinars and things that I do, they have been generous and helped me with that. So if you're looking for any next generation 911 solutions, make sure you check them out and tell them I sent you. So as I was going through last week's presentation and preparing for this week's presentation, I realized that on the PDF that I shared in the presentation, and then the one that I shared right after the session, I forgot to add some stars. There was a section of the body of knowledge that I forgot to add the little stars to. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, in the legislation piece for PDF from last week, if I knew that it was either on the body of knowledge or on the exam, or pieces of it were on the exam, I put a little red star on it. In other words, focus on the ones where you see the red stars. And I forgot to add them to these right here. They have since been added. The stars have been added. So if you downloaded that PDF right after I put it up, like within 2 days after putting it up, I would go back and re-download it, just because it was probably Monday or Tuesday, I think, that I updated the stars. So it will now include the Fair Labor Standard Act slide, Equal Pay Act slide, COBRA, Social Security Act as amended, and Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. And those were all on the body of knowledge, but I forgot to add that. So my apologies. These things under legislation are what I call NFI, and I will give a big prize to anybody that knows what NFI is. I'll give you a minute. Anyone? No freaking idea. And yes, I put an R on the end of idea, because that's what I say. I have an idea. That's what happens when you're from Massachusetts. But on the body of knowledge, there is under the special legislation, it says EMD laws. I have no idea what they want you to know about EMD laws. What I know is that they differ from state to state. Here in Massachusetts, we have an EMD law that says that anybody answering 911 has to provide emergency medical dispatch. And that means either you do it yourself or you outsource it and you pass that call off to somebody else to take care of emergency medical dispatch. But as far as what the exam wants to know, I don't recall anybody making mention, and I don't recall seeing anything on specifically EMD laws, but I'm not really sure what they're looking for there. So that falls under the NFI category. And then there is this other section that says FCC CRTC Canada, and it has these things listed underneath it. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're looking for it's in the middle of the legislation piece. So there are places where we do talk about wireless legislation today. And kind of PBX when we talk about MLTS in just a little bit. But as far as the other stuff goes, if you're looking for it on the body of knowledge for something for me to have gone over, it falls under the NFI tab. And I have no freaking idea. So there you go. This next section, funding and enabling legislation. So this isn't actually legislation right here. We're just going to go over some terms and things that they are looking for us to cover. So when we talk about funding and legislation that goes around funding, there's a few mechanisms and sources for funding. So number one, we know that our wireless devices and some telephone services have surcharges and levies. And a lot of times those amounts are not really going right back into 911. So we're very aware of that. Wireless surcharges, taxes, government funding, grants. In the state of Massachusetts, a portion of our wireless surcharges and our phone surcharges goes back into the PSAP under the support and incentive and training grants. So, it kind of falls under grants and government funding and telephone surcharges. So it's a little bit of everything, but those are the places where you can find some of this funding. As we're talking about these funds and how much money folks get, there are things that need to be taken into consideration. So limitation on the use of funds. As mentioned, we're not supposed to be using 911 funds for anything other than 911. And I say that with some kind of sarcasm, because there's a lot of times that a lot of that funding is being used in other places, which is not cool and not fair. All right. Very funny one. Sad, actually. Collection and distribution methods. So again, I'll use Massachusetts as an example because that's what I know and that's what we do. And this just kind of gives you an example of what I'm talking about here is collection and distribution. So state of Massachusetts or they get their money. I'm not exactly sure how they get the money from those taxes and surcharges, etc. But I know that they distribute it based on different factors, such as, how big is your PSAP? How big is your population? How many call taking consoles do you have? How many telecommunicators do you have? Things like that. So they use a formula to figure out who gets how much money. And obviously much larger agencies get much more money and the smaller agencies get less. Governing boards and requirements. Who says what this stuff gets to be spent on? What are the standards for telecommunicators? So when you look at even just a standard, not even just a standard, like I just had an example and I lost it, but when you look at the standards for, say, emergency medical dispatch, actually quality assurance, I'll take that one. So when you look at the standard for quality assurance, if the standard says that there should be 2% of the calls that have 2% of your call volume, which 2% is something I know to potentially be on one of the exams. But if that 2% indicates a very large percentage of calls, you might need to have more folks in the position to take care of those jobs. So when we look at how money's being divvied out, we got to look at things like, what are some of the standards saying? It would be nice if a standard said, if you provide EMD, there has to be a minimum of 2 telecommunicators on. Now, I know that's not a standard, but wouldn't that be nice? And then that would dictate funding based on standards for telecommunicators, standards for for equipment. So we know that there are standards that are saying that true NG 911, next generation 911, should be fully rolled out by the end of 2021. How'd that work out? Right? But it is a standard for equipment. And then standards for addressing, addressing and mapping. Okay, so these are things that need to be taken into consideration. Telecommunications regulatory environment. So I always look for ways to remember things, and this is how I'm going to remember this particular thing. So if you think of yourself as the foundation, the Communications Act of 1934, it talks about all the things that we think of when it comes to 911 communications. The Communications Act of 1934 was amended. When it became amended, it became the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And if you notice, with each year, the phrase is getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so the smallest one, if you're trying to remember which came first, the chicken or the egg, just look at the length of the title, right? So as we move on, it just gets bigger and bigger and encompasses more and more. So Communication Act of 1934 was the first one. It was amended to the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And then today, as it stands now, is the Wireless Communications and Public Safety Act of 1999. And that is going to be a piece of it on the exam, but or maybe on your exam. It has been known to be on the exam. So we will cover that in just a little bit. So the Telecommunications Act, which was the Communications Act of 1934 amended, is to promote competition and reduce regulation in order to secure lower prices and higher quality services for American telecommunications consumers and encourage the rapid deployment of new telecommunication technologies. In other words, it prevents a monopoly. It basically says that there has to be fair and equitable standards for folks that are coming into the telecommunications space. So that's what you need to know there. Then as we move forward, again, the Communications Act, Telecommunications Act, and now we are currently at the Wireless Communications and Public Safety Act of 1999. And the reason why I have the and highlighted and, or bold and underlined and all that is because at first glance, this does not appear to be what it says in the title. And what I mean by that is it is the act required the setup of enhanced 911 and mandated that 911 serve as an emergency number for non-landline phones, for landline and non-landline phones. So the piece, because it accommodates landline phones as well, it doesn't always sound like what it's supposed to. So there's that. Oh. And then this, oh, my screen just froze again. The Enhanced 911 Act of 2004 is an act establishing a national E911 implementation and coordination office, the ICO. It's basically the federal home for 911. They're charged with coordinating and implementation of 911 and E911 at the federal and local levels. And it also includes language that the funds collected for enhancing 911 services are to be used for the purposes in which they intended. Now, with that little star, there is somebody made note of there being a prevention of using 911 funds. I'm not sure if it's this act or another one. I don't know if the context is around there, but you may find something where they make reference to using funds for something else. It's a no-no, right? IP-enabled voice communications and Public Safety Act of 2007. And again, if you think about, so if you were to go to the Quizlet app and go under ENP and find the ones on legislation, what you're going to do is you're going to find the identifiable characteristics in the definitions of the acts. And so if you noticed, a few of them I've told you, it doesn't sound like what it's supposed to. Like in the last presentation last week, one of the last slides was the job class act, something or other. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but it was the creation of FirstNet. And so it didn't necessarily make sense. So I gave you a hint to say FirstNet created a lot of jobs. And then that's your way to connect to that piece of legislation. So, some of these, it's a no-brainer. Sorry, it just sounded like MedFlight was landing on my house. So in this case, the IP-enabled voice communications. So it shall be the duty of every IP-enabled voice service provider engaged in interstate or foreign communications to provide 911 services. So IP-enabled voice communications and Public Safety Act. So the act is basically saying that if you provide IP services, you have to provide 911 as well. And we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. NET 911 Improvement Act of 2008. NET is new and emerging technology. And this is to promote and enhance public safety by facilitating the rapid deployment of IP-enabled 911 and E911 services, encourage the nation's transition to national IP-enabled emergency network, and improve 911 and E911 access to those with disabilities. So there's a lot of different components to this particular one. And again, I'm giving you the definitions of them. These are the definitions as listed in your body of knowledge. But if you notice, there's no red star on some of these. So if I was taking the test over again and somebody handed me a PDF and it identified what's on the body of knowledge or what they know to be on the exam, that's where I'm going to probably spend the majority of my time. And if I get a couple wrong in this area, it's really not a big deal because there are only a handful of questions because the percentage is low, right? 5% is legislation. So do the math and figure out where and how much time you want to spend on things. So there's that. I may not give you the answers, but I'm going to give you study techniques. Food Conservation and Energy Act of 2008. Weird, right? Weird that this is going to be one that we know to be kind of on the exam, but it has been brought to my attention that we need to know something about this piece of it, and it's probably going to be that bottom piece right there. So it's also called the Farm Bill. It enables the Secretary of Agriculture to make loans to improve 911 access to entities eligible to borrow from Rural Utility Service, RUS. It extends 911 access eligibility to emergency communications, Homeland Security communications, and I think that's the piece. Okay, I think that's the piece where it's the Homeland Security. So there's something about giving 911 access to Homeland Security. So whatever the question is, it has something to do with that. Transportation, safety, communications, and location technologies used outside an urbanized area. So think about that. Outside an urbanized area, that's out in the boondocks, in the sticks, and chances are you're going to find some farms out there. That's how I'm going to remember that one. Sorry, I have. All right. Implementing recommendations of the 9/11 Commission Act of 2007. Now, this is 9/11, not 911. And I know sometimes people get that confused, right? And they'll call 911 9/11, but this is actually geared towards 9/11. And this is going to have to do with starting to build out that interoperability piece. So implementation regulations, recommendations of 9/11 Commission Act provides an implementation of recommendations of National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, which is the 9/11 Commission. It allows for $950 million per year, $950 million to be used per year for fiscal years 2008 to 2012 for state and homeland grants. Now, again, this is funding to be used for Homeland Security. There's something about that on the exam. I've told you it 3 times. There's 3 different places. I'm not quite sure which one that it's looking for. So I've marked it as a test. And it makes clear that such funds can be used for the PSAP. Now, I'm not sure where these funds are, if we're actually seeing the funds being moved to PSAPs, but this act allows that to happen. And it also establishes an interoperable emergency communications grant program. Okay, never mind. Go back. When I just made reference to FirstNet and creating jobs, it was this one. I thought I had it on the last one, but guess not. So when we go back and try to think of ways to remember, so up in that right-hand corner, it says, at first glance, it's not what you think. This I know will be on the body of knowledge. It's on the body of knowledge, and I know it to be on the exam as well, or maybe on your exam. But when you look at the title, Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. Okay, Job Creation Act. So what does this have to do with 911? So this is the act that basically called for the creation of FirstNet. So it called, well, not necessarily FirstNet, but you know what I mean, the broadband network. So it calls for the establishment of the National Public Safety Broadband Network. It is to be used to expand high-speed wireless broadband and improve communications interoperability among first responders. That is FirstNet. So there is a question on there about FirstNet. I don't know exactly what category, but this is one of the places that will touch on FirstNet, and it has to do with the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. And when I say at first glance, it doesn't look like what you think it does, but this is the way that I'm going to remember it, is that FirstNet created a lot of jobs. So if you can't remember anything else, job created jobs. Okay, so there you go. And FirstNet was created as an independent authority within the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the NTIA.
How to access the Emergency Response Data Platform. Any public safety agency can access life-saving emergency data through the RapidSOS Emergency Response Data Platform. There are two ways of doing so. RapidSOS Portal is a powerful web-based tool that enables you to manage emergencies and access location and supplemental data for every call in your jurisdiction. Signing up for RapidSOS Portal is easy and only takes a few minutes. In addition to emergency management tools and data, RapidSOS Portal includes a training platform as well as administrative tools to manage user permissions, track usage, and analyze trends in your agency. To learn more and sign up for RapidSOS Portal, please visit rapidsosportal.com. RapidSOS also integrates with every major CAD, CPE, mapping, or other public safety softwares. With an integration, you can receive RapidSOS data through your existing workflow, and you won't need any additional screens, tabs, or windows. To learn more about integrations, visit rapidsos.com/public-safety-partners.
So now we're going to talk about some FCC rules. So the FCC has their rules, laws, you know, a lot of times they're listed as the FCC rules versus legislation and laws. But in 2020, the year from hell, the FCC consolidated all of its telecommunication rules in one place. Okay, so they have a single house for all of the telecommunication rules, and these are the rules that live in that house. So add any of the wireline regulation calls, rules, mobile phone network provider rules, VoIP rules, telecom relay service rules, MLTS, multi-line telephone system, sellers, owners, and manager rules, and mobile satellite services, MSS providers. So anybody that is dealing with telecommunications, they have a set of rules that they have to abide by through the FCC, and we're going to go through some of those. So first, the wireless. I didn't even know about these rules or these things until I started working at RapidSOS, and then I learned them ad nauseum because some of the stuff I'm going to share with you is going to blow your mind. But as far as the FCC wireless rules go, what they want you to know is that the wireless rules seek to improve the effectiveness and reliability of wireless 911 calls with additional information on those wireless 911 calls. Okay. They apply to CMRSs, which is commercial mobile radio services. And here's what's like mind-blowing. As of 2020, wireless carriers are expected to provide a dispatchable location plus or minus 50 meters for all 911 calls from mobile handsets. But when I show you what the here it's listing by 2020 that they all should be providing that, but there's going to be a little bit of a contradiction. But I'll show you what I mean by that, because we're not fully there yet. We should be, but we're not. As far, and I should have moved the other slide up with this one, but maybe I'll change it when I update it so they're all in order. But our VoIP 911 rules, we talked a little bit about VoIP as a service and as a provider, but now we're talking about the actual, if you remember when we talked about VoIP, I said that there were FCC rules and I left it alone because I knew that we were going to be covering it here as well. So VoIP 911 rules, they seek to improve the effectiveness and reliability of VoIP 911 calls. All interconnected VoIP providers must automatically provide 911 to all their customers as a standard. Okay. Standard mandatory feature. They must not need to request it. I should not have to request 911 services. And I remember when VoIP first came out, Vonage first came out, and companies like that, there was a home invasion that took place, and there was a doctor and his wife and his daughter in the house. And I don't remember where the call was, but I do remember it was a VoIP issue where they had a VoIP phone in their home. It was when they were fairly new. And when they dialed 911, their phone gave them the, oh, sorry, you can't call 911 from this phone. Please hang up and try from another device. And what ended up happening is when they used that VoIP, when they got the VoIP phone service, there was this little fine print that said you have to opt in, you have to add it, you have to pay for it. And over time, they realized, whoa, wait a minute, if you're providing a phone service, you have to provide 911 services as well. So with that, it became mandatory that VoIP providers, by the FCC's rules, had to provide 911 services. Now, with that said, the opposite, almost opposite holds true, is that the customers can't opt out of it. They can't say, oh no, sorry, I don't want to pay extra for 911. They have to have it. They have to authorize it, and it has to be part of their service. So that's a voice over internet rule. As of 2021, all fixed, meaning non-nomadic, they don't move. Okay, you can't pick your phone up and go to Florida from Massachusetts. So the non-movable ones, the non-nomadic interconnected voice systems must deliver automated dispatchable location with every 911 call. Now, with that said, we're going to run into a few little snafus. But when I explain this and explain the story, hopefully it'll resonate. Okay. The non-fixed, no fixed, or not non-nomadic, nomadic phone systems, the ones that you can pick up and move. Okay, so I can take my phone and go to Florida. I can move offices. I can, take this phone and go to a satellite location. They're not fixed. Those systems must deliver automated dispatchable location where it's technologically feasible, okay, or technically feasible. When it's not, they must deliver alternative location information. That might be the latitude and longitude of where it is, or the original registered location, which is where I have a problem with, because the way that it's worded, we're still finding that folks are getting through, we're finding that folks are getting through loopholes, okay? And then here is a list of the other rules, and you might see these again. They must provide a starting point address. Okay, so when you get that VoIP phone system, you have to have a starting point address. They have to make it easy to change. And today we know that the way that we're probably making things easy to change is how? On the internet, right? Be able to jump into my account and be like, oh, I'm going to move my phone here. This is the one I have a problem with because of the way that it is worded and why I am such a stickler. if you've ever even listened to me, you know that I am a huge proponent of multi-line phone systems being properly provisioned and addressed. And if not, you have to file discrepancy forms. And if you're not filing discrepancy forms, you best go watch the webinar that's on my website under training, under webinars, about multi-line phone systems and Carey's law and discrepancy forms, because, you know, this is what's helping to save lives. But this third bullet must transmit all 911 calls, as well as callback number and registered physical location, okay, to the appropriate PSAP. So when you have a multi-line phone system or a VoIP phone system call that's going to Northern 911 in Canada, that's going to the main facility PSAP in the next town over, this is wrong. But where there's a little tiny loophole is it says registered physical location. So they can kind of get around it if that's the registered physical location, even if it's wrong. It doesn't clarify that, and that ticks me off. They must tell customers that there might be limitations in calling 911. And then they have to have a EULA. And I didn't even know what a EULA was until like 4 or 5 years ago when I started presenting on this stuff. End user license agreement. If they don't have, if their phone system is going to have issues calling 911, or could potentially have issues, which all VoIP phones can, they must have folks sign off basically saying, I acknowledge that there's a chance I might not get the help that I need because my call might not go where it's supposed to. And if there is a problem, they are supposed to have a label on that device saying that 911 services may not work. And then that bottom piece there, as mentioned in the third bullet, is 911 calls must be routed to the appropriate PSAP. But what is technically the appropriate PSAP? It's the one that the address is provisioned to by definition, but we're trying to get that changed. We're trying to get folks to be more aware. We're trying to get them to be more aware of when the calls are not going to the appropriate PSAP based on the address. So there we go for that. Telecommunications Relay Services, TRS. It allows persons with hearing and speech disabilities to place and receive calls. There is no cost to the user. Okay, service providers are generally federally compensated for providing it. So if they're going to provide it, which they're supposed to, they're supposed to be able to have some type of telecom relay services. And as of 2021, the FCC's dispatchable location rules for interconnected VoIP and MLTS also apply to TRS. And then they have the same nomadic rules. So as we mentioned on the previous slide, if it's a movable solution, they have to at least have, you know, something like latitude, longitude, or a pre-programmed location for dispatch. This was the one that I'll probably move it up in, or maybe I'll just keep it like this because in case somebody's making notes as, but just know I probably should have put it with the wireless section, but I'm a little fried. Anyway, so January 29th of 2016, the fourth public safety fourth report and order adopted measures that will significantly enhance the PSAPs to accurately locate callers both indoors and outdoors. All commercial radio mobile systems, your cell phone providers, must provide 1, dispatchable location, and 2, XY coordinates plus or minus 50 meters for the following percentages. I just want to put something into perspective. I started working at Rapid SOS at the end of 2016. When I was looking at these numbers, when I was sharing these numbers in presentations, I was standing up in front of people just, 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, standing up in front of folks saying 40% of your 911 calls, only 40% of your 911 calls by FCC standards are supposed to give a location within 50 meters. And that by 2021, 80%, by 2021, I'll send a prize if anyone can tell me what year Apple and Google partnered with Rapid SOS to deliver device-based location. Anyone in the chat, I will send you a prize because I just want you to see the perspective. 2020? No, that was the year from hell. Nothing good happened then. 2016? No. And you guys could just guess, but in 2018, yes, Mark, I will send you a prize and I will write that down. I mean, really, you just could have kept writing the numbers until then, but I said I'll give you a prize because this was a big deal. In June of 2018, only 50% of wireless devices were providing or had to provide location within 50 meters, just 50%. And now we're in 2022 and we're still not at 100%. We're still we're still in the 80% mark. So if you look at your 911 calls and your wireless phase 2 locations, they are getting better. They are getting better. Folks will say, no, they're not. Yes, they are. They are because the FCC is making them. So 2021, 80%. Crazy. This is another one. I don't think we are where we're supposed to be. Because correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not in the center right now, so I'm not sure. But last time I checked, you guys are still not getting Z access on your alley screen. You may be getting it to an extent on the Rapid SOS portal on Android devices. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the last I knew, the only place you were able to see any type of Z access, altitude. Okay, some Verizon calls you get it, but not all. Okay, good. So the way I know is it's either an Android device or the Apple devices. It's the Android devices that if you take a call and it's on the portal, look on the little tab. When you click on the number, look on the tab. It may tell you what the altitude is. Okay. Does that mean anything to you? Probably not. Given the circumstances that I don't even know what altitude I'm at right now in my home. I don't know, like, you know, it might not tell me what floor they're on. It might give me a number, but I don't really know how to translate that into anything. And you know, a lot of folks talk about it. Here's another stickler. If I'm in a hotel and I can gauge that X meters means which floor, most hotels don't have a 13th floor. So is it going to be accurate information? Not thoroughly. But what is listed in your book as far as vertical location goes, it is the 6th report and order, which is the most recent one. That was in 2020, set the benchmark for Z access. And it says the top 25 cellular market areas must deliver vertical location plus or minus 3 meters for 80% of the calls by April of 2023, plus or minus 3 meters. When our wireless calls, which we've actually done pretty good with getting better location, is still plus or minus 50 meters. Think of it, the Z axis. If there's a question there, it's a little unrealistic, but plus or minus 3 meters for 80% of the calls by April of 2023. And then after April of 2023, that's going to apply to the next top 25 for a total of top 50. Okay. The second report in order, like I said, we are currently on, I believe we're on the 6th. I don't recall a 7th coming out, but I believe we're in the 6th report in order. As far as text to 911, basically that says 2014, December 31st of 2014, CMRS, commercial mobile radio services, CMRS, they must provide capabilities through the phone to text 911. Now, does that mean that they have text to 911 or that they've turned it on in every area? No, we are actually still way behind in deployment of text to 911. A few other things that they want you to know about in this area is sovereign immunity. And I always remember this by, sovereign immunity. It just sounded like old day kings and queens and all that. But basically it's crown immunity that says you can't sue the king. And I don't know why it refers to not being able to sue the king, but basically it says that you can't really sue a governmental entity if they're not in the wrong or they're not doing something wrong, that it's going to be a pretty challenging fight. Now, does that mean that you can't ever sue a governmental entity? No, it does not. We know that people have been successful in suing agencies for various things, but the sovereign immunity is the general understanding that crown immunity is, which is sovereign immunity is also called crown immunity, is a legal doctrine whereby a sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong and is immune from civil suit or criminal prosecution, strictly speaking, in modern texts in its own courts. And again, I say this all the time, and maybe this will kind of go back. Don't be afraid of being sued. Be afraid of successfully being sued. It is going to be very challenging to sue a governmental entity. Even if it looks cut and dry, it is going to be challenging, to say the least. So sovereign immunity or crown immunity. And if you listen to True Crime Podcast, you hear them say the crown all the time. That's the judge, a judge, right? So I just think it's going to be challenging to sue a judge because they know stuff. Telecommunications services priority. This is going back to a little bit more with FirstNet. This is a program that authorizes national security and emergency preparedness organizations to receive priority treatment for vital voice and data circuits or other telecommunication services. So priority to all public safety, and that in turn today is FirstNet. PUC requirements. Public Utilities Commission. What does this have to do with 911? No idea. NFI, no freaking idea. But it's listed there. So I'm going to put it here. I'm not going to read the screen. You can pause it. You can read it. You can print it out. It doesn't make sense for me to just read this because the only thing relevant is the unbundling piece, which is listed on the body of knowledge. And it says a non-exempt ILEC, which an ILEC is an incumbent LEC. Local exchange carrier. I think it just had a stroke. A non-exempt local exchange carrier shall maintain a wholesale tariff tax for available interconnection services and unbundled network elements. I don't know what that means, but you can do with it what you want. And then we have a special legislation area. So we're going to talk, as I said, a little bit about MLTS right now, but we're also going to talk a little bit more about it when it comes to Kerry's Law and Ray Baum's Act next week. So our multi-line telephone systems, formerly called PBXs, they're single, multiple, they have remote locations. We do know that they provide challenges, especially if they're not programmed properly. They are what we call an enterprise communication system. So if you watch the webinar that I mentioned on my website with Mark Fletcher and Carrie Hunt's father, Hank Hunt, you'll hear Mark Fletcher refer to enterprise. That's what he's referring to, is the multi-line phone system. Okay. He also just did a webinar through the Denise Amber Lee Foundation. And if you go to the Denise Amber Lee Foundation's website, they have an area where you can register for webinars. They have webinar Wednesdays, and he just recently did one for them that you can still get access to, but he refers to these multi-line telephone systems as the enterprise. Okay. And it's not the spaceship. Right? That's the name of the enterprise. Is that what's the name of the spaceship? Okay. Some have one main number and some have individual numbers into their offices. So in my old office, I had a direct number that you could call right into my office. But when I picked up my phone, it would find it would find one of those trunk lines, and then it would move over. Yes, he definitely has a lot of knowledge, that man. Private Switch Alley, PS Alley is part of it. And PS Alley is a service that allows users of multi-line phone systems like PBXs to directly control and update the location information of their telephone stations in the 911 database. This is what we're supposed to be doing. When it's not correct, they need to be going through their PS Alley and making those changes. The laws for the ADA accessibility. The ADA regulation requires 911 or other telephone emergency service providers to provide TTY, TDD users with direct access. Okay. They have to have direct access to 911, just like everybody else. So that second bullet there is an opportunity to benefit from the emergency services that is equal to the opportunity afforded to others, right? This is a challenge, but we have to make sure that we're doing that. And I've talked about it in webinars, the importance of understanding your TTY and your teletype and when you should be using it and when you shouldn't be using it. Okay. We have our TTY protocols. Now, there is very limited information. It does list it, TTD and TTY legislation and protocols on the body of knowledge. There isn't a ton of it in the book, but these are the things that we need you to know. Is when you are communicating, and if you're going through any type of relay service for TTY or TDD, you should be talking to the operator as if you're talking to the caller, okay? Some folks get a little bit confused. They'll say, ask the caller this. It shouldn't be ask the caller this. It should be, are you having any chest pain? And even though you're talking to a translator, you should be talking to them as if you are talking to the caller. When you are finished and waiting for a response, you will type GA for go ahead. If you have a question, okay, use a QGA at the end of a sentence to indicate a question. Now you go ahead and answer. And GASK means I'm through. Do you have anything further? And if they don't, they will type SK. Stop keying, don't say anything else. Okay. Cellular and personal communication services. So cellular is, I think really what we need to know here is analog and digital. So we still have analog cellular devices, but the PCS, the personal communication services, is comprised of several types of wireless voice or wireless data communications, but it is all digital. Okay. This is listed under your legislation, nuisance and false alarm legislation. A person who knowingly causes a false alarm or fire or other emergency to be transmitted to or within any organization, official or volunteer for dealing with emergencies involving danger to life and property is committing a misdemeanor or misdemeanor. Mass notification systems. I think what it wants you to be aware of is the different acts and codes and laws that are associated with mass notification systems. So there, depending on what the system is, there has to be precautions or you know, you have to have access. Disabilities, those with disabilities have to have access to notification systems. Most of them will have them that I can opt in as someone with disability that uses a particular device, whether it's sending it via text message or telecom relay services, etc. The Clery Act is based after somebody with the last name Cleary. There was an incident on a college campus. So educational institutes. So the Clery Act basically says that they have to notify of certain criminal offenses and acts that happen on or within close proximity of educational institutes. Higher Education Opportunity Act, National Fire Alarm and Signaling Coding, which is our NFPA, associated with buildings and codes. Rehabilitation Act, Section 508, disability notifications, including JAWS. So JAWS is a notification for those with visual impairments. So there are screen readers that are able to be utilized. And I know that because I interviewed a friend of mine that was a legally blind telecommunicator, and he is on one of my podcasts. So if you want to go back and listen to that, he used in dispatch, he used the JAWS technology where it would screen read the boxes and he was able to dispatch. It was actually a pretty impressive story, but it was JAWS that allowed him to do that. And then Unified Facilities Criteria, UFC, which applies to general buildings and often tied into fire alarms. Open records legislation, or FOIA, our favorite, okay? Freedom of Information Act generally provides that any person has the right to request access to federal agency records or information, except when the extent of the records are protected from disclosure by any of the 9 exemptions contained in the law or by one of the 3 special law enforcement record exclusions. So it's not listed. Just know that there are some exemptions, like I'm not entitled to the victim's name if it's involving a juvenile or a domestic violence person. So there are some rules there. And then this one, I'm just going to leave this up here. You can read it on your own. There's a lot there. And to be fully honest with you, I have no idea what it has to do with 911, but it is listed there. So therefore, I give it to you. So that's that. That is what we are covering today. I think next week we're going to probably go the full hour and a half. I have a full plate of stuff to go over, but we've finished legislation, and we will do, we have 2, Carrie's Law and Ray Baum's Act, and then we will be moving on. So with that, heroes, you know what I'm going to say. Stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. And I will try to get this out in the near future. My goal is to get it out this weekend so I can enjoy Monday. And hopefully things will be going well with my mom, and I'll be able to do that. So have a great weekend if it is your weekend. And I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you.